Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the High North Dialogue 2026. Glad you all made it. The weather is not the best. It has been better the days before, but the weather is changing quickly in Bude and all over the Arctic. Welcome to the High North Dialogue 2026. My name is Andreas Raspotnik. I am the director of the High North Center for Business and Governance, the unit responsible for gathering you all here, a center part of the new University Business School that has been organizing this dialogue for quite a while now. And we're very happy that you were able to make it again. When organizing a conference, I always think about some Forrest Gump and the famous chocolate scene, because you have certain ideas, what you want to do with a conference, but you never really know what you get out of it, because, you have ideas, you want to invite people, some can come, some cannot come, some cancel at the last minute because of weather or whatever problems and issues. So, but here we are, and we really hope for 2 full days of good dialogue. For those who have been at conferences before, or for those who are new at conferences, the main aim is not really, or the main objective is not to what really happens up here. It's what happens with you guys, to talk with each other, to get to know each other, to have an active dialogue about the topics to be discussed up here, and also about your research. Talking about research, the High North Dialogue is an event organized by New University and by New University Business School and the High North Center. So it is very much a conference for people studying at university, for young people that are interested in the Arctic and that want to learn more about the Arctic, not per se from this bigger geopolitical climate change perspective, but more from the local perspective, from the socioeconomic aspect. So we really hope you enjoy these 2 days of dialogues. The setup we have here is really about quick panel for an hour up here. Then we go into side events where you hopefully can work with the knowledge that has been shared up here. Then we come back to a panel. So it's really, hopefully, an active engagement here and in the main rooms outside. The event hall, or the Radisson here, I think offers this nice floor that we can really be active, interactive in this 1.5 days. 2 more things. You see, I'm an orange one, you're a green one. So if you have any questions related to the conference, to anything technical, admin, look for the orange people. They can help you. Those are my team at the High North Center, and those responsible for organizing that. So don't thank me if you like the conference. Thank them. If you have something to criticize, then come to me. One more thing, emergency exit is always important. We can all read. We all know how they look like. If there is something, please follow them quietly, and again, look out for the people in orange. That having said, we are a conference-based and a center-based at university, and to help me kick off and welcome you all here in Bude, I want to welcome the acting rector of New University, Levi Garshet-Nesbak, to also welcome you here at Radisson in Bude. And Levi, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. Hello, everyone. Very nice to see so many of you participating here today. So, dear Minister, members of the Sami Parliament, ambassadors, and fellow academics, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the High North Dialogue 2026. Each year, as Andreas pointed out, we gather stakeholders here in Bude to discuss the past, the present, and the future of the Arctic region. The Arctic is a diverse region with the rest of the world close by, and the interest in the Arctic is on the rise in several regions. This is emphasized by the diversity in the main subjects of the High North Dialogue: governance, business, resilience, and people. In addition, we also discuss logistics, space, entrepreneurship, and youth, among other things. Universities play an important role in developing the Arctic through education and research, of course. We also build a ground on which other parts of society can grow further. Nord University is a part of the Arctic University Alliance. Arctic 6, together with Aulo, Lapland, Umeå, Luleå, and UiT. Given our location, it is of course natural for us also to seek to develop knowledge about the Arctic. We also seek close relations with the University of the Arctic. This is a big community. And we are also part of the CEU Alliance. And part of the reason why we 4 years ago approximately were invited into the CEU Alliance, of course, were stemming from our core areas of education and research, but also our location. They wanted to hook up with a university partner in the High North region as well. And we are also now drafting a new development agreement with the ministry, and a part of the focus that we would like to elevate is precisely knowledge about the High North area. And the High North Dialogue has a focus on young people, and I would also like to say it belongs to young people. Or maybe we should say all those who identify as young people. And the young people are the future, of course, and they are very important contributors in the development of the future. It is important for Nord University to include our students on different happenings that is organized by the university. We all want to announce as a part of this these days event at the High North Young Entrepreneurship, and this will take place later on today. Also, the High North Dialogue is an important meeting place for different stakeholders about Arctic topics. And I think it's very important for us to have a forum in which we can discuss important things and engage with people and topics that you all find very valuable. Also to meet people, of course, from different places and to get some new perspectives on how to understand a variety of topics pertaining to the High North is important to all of us. I want to thank the High North Center for organizing this conference. Year after year, they have been doing this for quite some time. Also, thank you to all the contributors, and a warm thank you to all participants showing up today. We all hope you will be inspired and decide to bring some of the thoughts back home with you to get some changes done, right? So good luck with the conference. I hope it will be fruitful for all of you. Thank you.
Tusen takk, Levi. You're completely right. The High North Center has been organizing that conference for quite a while. And for those who are a bit older, either if we are or if we identify as young or old, have been also following the Arctic for quite a while. And as we know very well, the Arctic is changing on many different aspects. And raising more and more awareness also outside the Arctic. And we all know what has happened over the last few months when it comes to Arctic issues and how they have been discussed, in what kind of sense and what kind of aspects. And to put that Arctic development a bit into context and also to kick off the conference here, we are very happy that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has sent their top diplomat and quite an Arctic experienced person for many, many years to put it in context and to help us, particularly the young people out there, that the Arctic is not a new phenomenon, that has reached maybe now the center of politics, also outside the Arctic, but that it has been on the agenda for Norway and for other European countries for quite a while, Nordic countries. And he has been in Bodø a few months ago to kick off the academic year. So he has a sense of how we work at Nord University and in Bodø, and has a sense of who you are as an audience. And Espen, Eide, Minister of Foreign Affairs, we're very happy and grateful that you're here, and that to all the support of the government for quite a while. High North Policy, High North Center, there is a connection. Espen, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andreas. Thank you, Rector Levi. Members of the Sami Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's great to be back here in Bodø, or in Bodø, which is also called in Lulesamisk, I believe it is, and it's great to be here. And indeed, I was here at the opening of the academic year, and you said I should come back for the High North Dialogue, and I did. So I do what I'm told, particularly if my political advisor agrees, and she did agree. And and as you said, the Arctic is really central to world geopolitics for good and bad, but at least that is absolutely a fact, as I think we've all seen over the last years. And that means that the experience, knowledge, competence, research that we already have, and all that is being developed here in Bodø and in Tromsø and in all the other centers of learning are becoming even more relevant also outside of the Arctic, northern, the European Arctic, because what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. We have said that many times, for instance, in the context of climate change, because there is no place on land in the world, on the planet, where climate change happens faster than in our Arctic. So that's an insight we learn here for the world. But this is also becoming true for security policy. And actually, in security affairs, you could almost say it's the other way around. What happens in the world comes to the Arctic. So the idea of Arctic exceptionalism, that we could have a separate type of geopolitics for the Arctic alone, which actually worked for a while. It was possible to maintain organized, decent multilateral cooperation in the Arctic through the Arctic Council, for instance, with limited negative effects of heightening geopolitical tensions, at least until the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine. That is also no changing, and we're back in a world where we have been before, because we were there during the Cold War. Make no mistake, I'm not saying that the Cold War is back as it used to be, but that kind of security policy importance of this region is back. And that's something those of us who do identify as young, even if we are chronologically not necessarily so young, will remember from the Cold War days. A very important insight about Arctic security, which I try to share with all my colleagues, and particularly to those who are not from the Arctic, and in one specific case for somebody who has a country in the Arctic but who might want to study more Arctic security policy, is that it's not correct that this is a kind of Klondike opening up where different powers are trying to grab land or grab ocean space and look for resources, and kind of a constant battle for resources. That's wrong. It's not happening, and actually your center has published reports which very solidly demonstrates that that myth is not correct. Of course, there is more activity and all that, but that is not really the problem. So that's a misunderstanding. However, if what is similar to Cold War days is that the geostrategic importance of weapon systems and surveillance and sensors that are placed in the Arctic are now much higher on the security agenda. And we know that because 6-7 kilometers east of Kirkenes, I think it's 850 kilometers from here, but the north is large. We have the Kola Peninsula. The Kola Peninsula, the Severodvinsk base and all the bases in Kola holds the largest concentration of nuclear weapons in the world. So they are just outside our door. And many of those are on Russian strategic submarines, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed submarines with a colossal power of destruction. And they operate out of the Barents Sea, which is shallow, and then they go west of Svalbard, the Svalbard-Norway gap, and go into deep waters. And they are not there because of us, but because of North America, US and Canada. And the best way to look after what's happening, follow what's happening, begins here. So if you're concerned about Arctic security, you should look to our north. And for the Canadians present, also to the west of Canada, because a similar thing is happening on the other side, not Greenland. So that's, Arctic security is important. Greenland is a good friend, part of the Kingdom of Denmark, very good relations to the government in Copenhagen and in Nuuk. But this idea that Arctic security centers around Greenland is simply not based on facts. But there is an Arctic security issue. And it has to be taken very seriously, and it's familiar. And we know quite a bit about it. So this is one of the reasons why Arctic security is now high on the agenda. And one thing that we do as Norway, but working closely with all our Arctic friends, is to try to steer this novel debate, this novel interest in non-Arctic countries about Arctic security from the myth to focusing on the reality. So jump into one of the most contentious issues. We had a very difficult situation around President Trump's claim that he wanted Greenland for American security, where, of course, the first thing we would remind is that Greenland is actually part of NATO. There is a defense agreement from 1951, which gives almost unlimited access for the US and the US military to Greenland anyway. It was a voluntary unilateral decision of the past US governments to withdraw most of that. They would be welcome back at any time, but in the context of NATO and in the context of respect for the Kingdom of Denmark. But out of that came a very clear message that made the Arctic geopolitically important. It was a dual message. Number one, from the 31 members of NATO, that is not the US, there is no way a NATO country is going to take the territory of another NATO country. That's a no-go, not happening, and we will all be in solidarity with the Kingdom of Denmark. Second message, there is an Arctic security issue, and we're happy to talk about it. So we have then, with the Nordics and Canada and the US that are Arctic states, all of them, we have developed what we call an Arctic 7 initiative in NATO, which is going quite well, where there's an increasing understanding. We developed something called the Arctic Sentry, which is an expression of this. It's basically not necessarily doing very new things, but highlighting things we already do and making that putting that higher on the security agenda, and that makes us relevant, and that makes this knowledge relevant. That's what I wanted to say and because of that, I'm really happy that we many years ago decided in this country to concentrate on the High North in our security planning. I was part of the government that 21 years ago said that the High North shall be our #1 strategic focus area in the years to come. Out of that came the decision to move the Norwegian Joint Headquarters from Stavanger in South Norway to Reitan, just outside of here. From that, you can also read the background for why this new Air Command Center is placed here in Bodø, and also why so much of the military emphasis is on the north. The fact that Finland and Sweden has joined NATO is excellent news, I would say, for them, but that was their choice, but also for us. Because Norway never had a land border to a NATO ally for the first 74 years of NATO's existence. It's only over the last few years that we actually have land borders with other NATO countries, and that means that we have a new degree of strategic depth and togetherness in this area. And that is really, it's great news for us in defense terms, in security terms, but also for developing our neighborhood. And one thing I very much welcome is the growing recognition that we have to build on that enhanced defense partnership with our close Nordic neighbors, and particularly in this context, Sweden and Finland, because that's where the land border goes. But there is much untapped potential. And the university, Nord University, and the Arctic University, together with, I think it is Luleå, Umeå, Lapland, and Oulu universities, are now developing this Arctic 6 initiative, which I believe is just one part of that. And I know very well that this is not only to promote academic research, but also to drive innovation and development and further develop this. You know, 20 years ago, when we talked about Barents from Oslo or from Tromsø or from Bodø, we knew there were many countries, but it was basically about Norway and Russia in our head, you know, that the opportunities that arose there. That relationship did not develop as we had hoped, and that's not thanks to us, to put it that way. That's somebody else's fault. But the opportunities now should be much more geared into this Nord i Norden cooperation that comes out of that initiative of strengthening and building on this new security partnership with countries that are also in the EU. You know, Sweden and Finland is in the EU. Norway is almost in the EU, although we don't say it that way normally, because we have the EA and 100 other deals with the European Union. And that means that we are in the same security and economic partnership, which is becoming increasingly important. And in the Norwegian government's hedging strategy, which part of our national security strategy, which of course again emphasizes the importance of the North, we are underlining that in a time of a more unpredictable transatlantic relationship, and it's not, Amy, it's not your part of the transatlantic, that's unpredictable, it's the other, the Canadian ambassador. We need to do everything we can to keep investing in the traditional transatlantic, but also strengthen our bonds to the European Union, to the UK, and to individual EU countries and Canada. And that's going quite well. So there is, there's an awakening of all the opportunities that were there all the time. They're not new opportunities. What is new is that we take them on and move forward, which is really, really inspiring. Not as an alternative, but as a balancing act. We are going to get a more European NATO, and we need to invest in that. And our defense investment shall not only be to enhance each and every country's own defense budgets, but also how we connect and integrate and become more powerful in our own terms. All of that within an overall ambition of keeping tensions low. We used to say high north, low tension. That is still the ambition. We recognize that tensions are not as low as they are, but we can maintain a degree of predictability, and that's also part of the foreign policy dimension of this security outlook. And again, I will end by that. We had a few months ago, we had the EU's foreign policy chief, High Representative Vice President Kaja Kallas, visiting northern Norway. She was participating in Arctic Frontiers, and then we had a bilateral program for her that she found very interesting, which she confirmed to me 2 days ago when I met her again in Brussels. And we are now deeply engaged in influencing the new European Arctic strategy. And again, experiences, long-term policies, academic insights, practical insights, business insights about what it actually is to operate in the Arctic is incredibly important to share with our close friends. And that's happening, and we're happy about that happening, and we believe it is going in a good direction. Norway is not alone in the north. Nordic cooperation, European cooperation, cooperation with Canada, and the traditional transatlantic cooperation is all becoming even more relevant, but in a new setting. We're happy that Arctic Council is still around. We chaired the Arctic Council until last year. The ambition was basically to keep it alive and to start to re-engage in committee work, some low-level practical work for maintenance and slow development without having high-level political meetings. The decision was that rather than excluding Russia or driving Russia to exclude itself, we should keep it at not very high speed, but keep it together for better times. And the current chairship, which is held by Greenland on behalf of the Kingdom of Denmark, which, in hindsight was a rather smart move, I think is continuing on exactly that track. So there's an ambition to maintain a circumpolar organization around the Arctic. I think that's worthwhile. Things change, wars end. We will have a difficult relationship to Russia even after the Ukraine war, and we need to think about how that is organized. But one of the things we should maintain for future use is the Arctic Council, because it actually includes all the countries that are in the Arctic, which have people living in the Arctic. And it has also been the primary arena for attracting non-Arctic but Arctic-interested countries into our club. And when I, in my former stint as foreign minister, campaigned to get more Asian observers into the Arctic Council, I said that it's much better to have people join our club than them making another club without us. I think that's still true. There is now an incredible amount of countries knocking on the Arctic Council door, wanting to get in, including the United Arab Emirates, which does not appear to be very Arctic when you are there. But they are interested because they know that the global geopolitics is connected. And if they didn't know, they would have discovered because of the Hormuz Straits troubles. We cannot allow countries in right now because we don't have the political meetings, but it shows that we have an arena that might, again, be very relevant as we continue to develop Arctic governance. Throughout all the work that we've been doing over these years, we have had a strong focus on ocean management, ocean preservation and balanced ocean resource exploitation, all under the umbrella of UNCLOS. And so UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. I always, when people ask, why do you care about international law? There are many ways to answer that, but I tend to begin with UNCLOS. There would be no UNCLOS without the UN. There's no UNCLOS without the UN Charter. It's embedded in some principles of international law, and it allows for free passage, for instance. It allows for the rights of coastal states, and it creates a lot of clarity on things that would have been extremely dramatic if they were not clarified. And if anybody thought that was a boring subject, well, just look at the hottest problem on today's geopolitical attention, which is the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. UNCLOS, Article 37 to 42, I'm sure you all remember and have practiced it, reminds us that a narrow strait or a narrow water area that connects two parts of the open sea shall, under all circumstances, be open for traffic, and any coastal states have explicit obligations to keep it open. And when we are now working with many allies to convince the interested parties, including Iran, to reopen the Hormuz Straits, it's not only an important service for the global economy, for energy, fertilizer exports, and for how the world is faring right now. It's also in defense of UNCLOS, in defense of rule of law internationally, and that is actually exactly the same thing as we're doing here, because we also have important ocean areas to manage, and it's important that we manage them in a legal manner, and the world is deeply connected, and Bodø is part of global geopolitics. It always was. This is where the U-2 plane was supposed to land when it was spying on Russia in 1960. This was in these years that led up to the Cuban Missile Crisis that almost exterminated the human race. So it's not a new thing that Bodø is part of the global geopolitics, but now we have to understand how Bodø and the areas around it is part of geopolitics of today. And that's what I've tried to put some highlight on, and I look forward to the ensuing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's also the geoeconomics. I grew up south of Austria, and every time we went to Trieste or Venice, we got tried cod, And where did the cod come from? Where did the Italians get it from? From Lofoten, so up here, So there's a long history in here. Thank you very much, Espen. We'll have some quick change of the scenery here, and then I would welcome you and the other panelists to the floor. Tusen takk. Thank you very much. All right, before we kick off this conversation, let me briefly introduce the people that have joined us now here. Espen, to my right, to his left, we have the Canadian ambassador to Norway, Amy Baker. Amy, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
To her left, we have Paul Bendik Jammer from the Sami Parliament Council in Norway. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in Bodø. To his left, we have Sophie Arts, fellow from the German Marshall Fund, United States. Coming straight from DC, thank you very much. And to his left, last but definitely not least, we have the ambassador of the European Union to Norway, Nicolas de la Grandville. Often been to Bodø. Thank you very much for joining us here. Espen, I want to quickly follow up with you. One question I always wanted to ask you, you have an academic and research background, the Arctic. Why do you think the Arctic as a region, as a topic, is so interesting for so many actors outside the world? I don't know if China has a Mediterranean policy or an Indian Ocean policy, but they have an Arctic policy. You mentioned the Arabs, Why is that the case? We know about the complexity of geopolitics, geoeconomics, but why the Arctic, for so many outsiders?
I think India believes that China has an Indian Ocean strategy
Probably.
as well, but, because it's a superpower. But obviously, it's actually quite obvious if you look at the map, and you should look at the right map, because get rid of this Mercator projection, which suggests that we are far away from the center of things. A much better map begins above the North Pole, and then what you see is an ocean. Simply an ocean surrounded by land, and that land connects the three growth economies in the world, North America, Europe, and East Asia, China. And the shortest route between these land masses is through the Arctic. That means for planes, missiles, in the long run also for ships. The reason we haven't thought about it that way is that it used to be icy. And that was actually a good thing because it was extremely important for the global currents and the global climate that it was icy. But sadly, for bad reasons, it is getting less icy. Although actually what the ice is moving to you, so it's more ice there. And, but overall, less ice. And that also opens new potential for new routes. And this has dawned on countries like China. So if you, and what do they do in China? They produce goods that we consume, and if you could sail from Shanghai to Europe, the northern route, you save a lot of time, and you don't need to go through to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal or around Cape Town. It's around Cape in the south. So, of course, that's interesting. And also there's this interest in collaborating with Russia on Russia's north. But here, I think it should also be understood that the idea that China and Russia is cooperating very closely has a caveat, because Russia is putting some limit on that, because they are actually a big country with few people. China is a not so big country, but with a colossal amount of people, and Russia sees the math. So they're also somewhat limited, but China takes an interest in this. And this is exactly why we said welcome to the observership, because we cannot tell them not to take an interest, but we can say that you can do that on our terms, and by becoming an observer, they had to sign up to some key principles that are, including the full respect for UNCLOS and the respect for the environment and so on. And I think that was a good thing to try to steer, because you will not get rid of that interest, but we can try to steer it into something that's good for the rest of us.
Thank you. And then another quick regional follow-up. You mentioned the Barents Cooperation. You mentioned the Nui Norden initiative. End of last year, we had a conference organized here by the Barents Secretariat about the future of Barents Cooperation. And there was really the main message, the main finding was there's a void. There's a void also when it comes to the narrative. What is the Barents was so strong as a message. And how do you tackle that void in the government, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and how do you try to create maybe a new narrative, a new message, including the Nordic partners, the South?
So now this is extremely important, and you're absolutely right. We discussed this in the High North strategy from last year, but let me spell it out here. It's actually a sad thing, because it was a very optimistic message for northern Norway, northern Finland, northern Sweden, the opening up, what we thought would be the opening up of Russia to more normal relations with whole great potential. When we used to think about joint declaration of gas fields, of infrastructure, developing a joint management of how, the entry to the Northeast Passage. There were all these discussions that we had, and particularly the eastern part of Finnmark. Finnmark is the last part of Norway before you come to Russia, to the extreme north. Eastern Finnmark used to be the periphery of the periphery, saw a great potential in this, and of course a big disappointment when it didn't really happen. Now, what we're trying to replace that with is to do what I actually always thought we should always also do, but which was a little bit on the back burner because of this emphasis on Russia, was to strengthen Norden cooperation, to reach out to northern Sweden, northern Finland, which again is the EU, and it is part of the EU, and of course driving key forces in building EU thinking on the north, and connect more to them in an east-west thinking. Norway, because of our geography, has had everything is north-south, apart from between Bergen and Oslo, but that's a different story. But for the rest, basically everything is north-south. Now, of course, east-west becomes much more important, and here we're just beginning to really reap the potential for business, for security, for academic cooperation. So I think the replacement of the old Barents vision is Norden.
Thank you. Let me bring in Nicola. I mean, what people often forget, the European Commission was part in the mid-90s to establish the Barents Cooperation. They were early on. The European Union had the Northern Dimension initiative when Finland, Sweden joined in the mid-90s. The Northern Dimension are officially gone now. Could you elaborate a bit more on the European Union's perspective about their North, the European Arctic, how this is changing or has been changed, the perspective on the European Arctic from a Brussels perspective?
Thank you very much. Very thrilled to be here and to be on this panel, and always difficult to speak after the minister because he has put the great picture. But it's exactly that. One and then three member states in the Arctic from the European Union. This very close partnership that has been mentioned through the European Economic Area Agreement with Norway and Finland. Very strong like-mindedness with Canada, and so it's the basic reason why we are there. I would say very much in support of the Norwegian thinking of the Arctic, meaning people live, work, study, take care of their health, of their cultural life, and attract tourism in the north. It's not a museum, it's not a place that is far away. It's, as it was said, there is a new centrality of the Arctic, and for that we have indeed developed policies aimed at cohesion, people-to-people dialogue, digitalization, transport, supporting universities, exchanges, people coming from the rest of Europe, but also all around the world, coming to the High North. And we've been investing on this. Of course, the situation has changed. Mainly through, you always had the threat on the environment that has increased, that is stronger here, and then it has its effects on the rest of the world. But also in security-wise, with the melting of the ice, the more possibilities and opportunities for transport, for research, for look for critical raw materials, but also, of course, the military tensions due to the war in Ukraine and a certain refocus on the military dimension of this. Important to keep the channels, the communication channels open, even if we cannot continue business as usual with Russia. We discussed this in previous sessions. The scientific, the research dimension has been going down, the political as well, but there are still projects, and we still are very careful at keeping channels open.
All right. Quick follow-up here also. The European Commission External Action Service are currently updating the EU's Arctic policy to be published this coming autumn. Again, the EU has an Arctic policy since 2008 and has been regularly updating it. And you've been an ambassador for quite a while. Do you see also an increased interest in northern parts of Europe from your colleagues, from our member states' colleagues, from your colleagues in the Commission External Action Service, trying to get more information from you about what is actually happening?
Absolutely. This is a two-way street. More interest from member states and throughout the whole European Union area vis-à-vis the Arctic. You have a lot of visits. 2 and a bit more than 2 years ago, Budo, European Capital of Culture, together with other an Austrian and an Estonian cities or regions. So there are all these links. And also more interest from the north, from the Norwegian authorities and people and communes from Sweden and Finland, vis-à-vis the whole perspective that the EU is allowing and the cooperation possibilities that we have. So it's a mutual discovery, I would say, or rediscovery of interest. And then you have I like to mention, because I like the idea, this cooperation and cultural route between Budo and Italy in Venice via Querenissima, because this was a few centuries ago. That's why it's not always new that people came from the Mediterranean up here and went back and brought exchanges of culture and so it's all about people in the end.
I think that's often forgotten, that geoeconomics of the Arctic is, for example, not a new phenomenon, The North has been feeding, for example, Europe or enlightening Europe for quite a while, if you also look on the whaling aspect. I want to bring in now our Canadian counterpart here. Amy, your prime minister is now all over the news because he gave a very inspiring speech in Davos about the future of the world and how we, what's happening next and how we can frame ourselves as Europeans, as Nordics, as Canadians in this very changing world. I mean, as a follow-up here on what you have heard from Espen and Nicolas here, like what are the Canadian perspective now on more Nordic-Canadian cooperation on many aspects, from security, we heard about defense cooperation, but also ocean management issues, etc.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's such a great pleasure to be here with you this morning. And I think Nicolas will agree with me. When you have such strong alignment, there's nothing better for an ambassador than to be able to say, I agree with everything the foreign minister said, and we can just leave it at that. It's really quite incredible. But of course, for Canada, what is different is not our policy perspective on these issues, it's our geography. So the Canadian Arctic is more than 40% of the landmass of the second largest country in the world, and there's less than 200,000 people living there. So that immediately puts you in a very different context when you're talking about the Canadian Arctic. Now, historically, in addition to relying on the natural strength and resilience of the people that live there, we relied on the environment, we relied on our allies, and we relied on a stable world to ensure that our Arctic was functioning well as it could be. The world has changed. Other than that natural strength of the communities that live there, all of those other things are now shifting for Canada. And what does that mean for us? It means we need to build in our Arctic, that we need to have greater infrastructure. And there, yes, defense infrastructure, yes, security infrastructure, but also economic infrastructure and dual-use infrastructure so that we can continue to work with the Indigenous peoples and the communities of the North to really build that resilience in that part of our country. Our Prime Minister often talks about the fact that we can build more, we can give ourselves more than anyone else can take away from us. And that's a really important lens with which we're looking at how we can continue to develop in a sustainable way the Canadian Arctic. But we can't do that alone. That it needs to happen also with the people who live there, but also with other partners. Of course, the governance of the Arctic is the domain of Arctic states, but there are so many other ways that we can collaborate with other partners. For Canada, that collaboration needs to also include common values. Our Prime Minister in his Davos speech, which you kindly mentioned, talked about the concept of variable geometry and the idea of interest-based coalitions to move agendas forward where we have common cause. Canada and the Nordics have an extreme amount of common cause when it comes to the Arctic, and that includes the values base, that includes the human rights approach that we want to take, that includes the rules-based international order that we want to support. And so it's not unusual that the generous hosting of the Norwegian Prime Minister was for the first N5 Canada summit here about a month ago now, where all of these issues were discussed. And that was really the first operationalization for Canada of this idea of variable geometry at play. And it's also worth noting that in addition to talking about geopolitical issues, in addition to talking about support for Ukraine, what were the areas of collaboration? Critical minerals, space, defense and security, and energy, all areas that, and Arctic collaboration, all areas that are really, really critical to the development of our Arctic, and all areas where we can continue to deepen that collaboration. Now, of course, there we're talking about Canada and the Nordics, all who are Arctic states. I'd end with a bit of a shout out as well to the European Union, because the leadership of the Arctic states within the European Union, but also the research agenda, the sustainable development approach is extremely aligned with Canada, and will continue to work closely with the European Union and others, other non-Arctic states that share that values-based approach, that really ensure that what we're doing together is for the benefit of the Arctic itself and the Indigenous population and the Northerners who live there.
Thank you very much. I mean, you mentioned space, defense, critical minerals. I mean, we're here in Nordland. We know about Andøya space. Defense, we've heard from Espen, you know what's happening outside Bude, critical minerals, Narvik, etc., coming from Kiruna. Like, Amy, from your day-to-day work as a diplomat, you know, if you talk about fostering cooperation on those matters, how does that work, you know? Like, you have a prime minister, a government in Canada, they come here. We just heard yesterday, you told me that the prime minister here and a more representative. To our young audience, how does it work as a diplomat? Like, how can we strengthen those, whatever aspects of collaboration with Nordic partners or with the EU? Like,
and the work of a diplomat in that is to facilitate connections. So what you're trying to do is find those opportunities, see where there could be concrete collaboration. Because I think the biggest challenge once you have such strong alignment is, well, what do we actually do with that? How does that translate into action? So our work is to make the connections. When we have a high-level visit, it's very helpful, because then you can have two prime ministers or two ministers signing an agreement that frames that work that then goes forward. The actual work then happens usually company to company, or organization to organization, or university to university. What we then can do is make sure that the right people are talking to the right people, and that if there are any barriers to that collaboration, that we help to get rid of those barriers. So in Canada, when we're talking about, say, something commercial, there's the federal level. We also have provincial governments. We also have municipal governments. All those level of governments would be involved if, for example, you had a Norwegian investment into Canada in I don't know, if I take synthetic graphite as an example, because that's a recent one with Keynote in Canada. All of those levels of governments have to engage, as do the indigenous stakeholders. And so our role is to make sure that those things are aligning, that the people who need to be aware of barriers to remove them are aware, and that we continue to make sure that that things progress as quickly as possible. Because one of the big challenges we find is speed. If you're not really moving things forward quickly, they're going to stall out. And if things stall out, you lose the momentum. And one of the things our Prime Minister is really focused on now, and our government is really focused on now, is increasing the speed of these major investments happening. We have a major projects office that is supposed to cut, you might be shocked by the what it's cutting, how many years it's cutting from, but the average project approval phase cutting from 7 years to 2. So 7 years sounds like an awful lot. 2 years could sound like an awful lot, but that's a huge improvement. And we need to make sure that those things are happening and that the countries are aware of what those opportunities are.
Can we borrow that agency?
That's a really interesting point, because, I mean, bringing just quickly in the European Union, I mean, the EU is a regulatory power. And that regulatory power also extends, you know, beyond the EU single market, you know. But on the other hand, it could also be criticized, because there's so many regulations, you know, that make development up here in the north or somewhere else difficult. And here I would also say we face the peripheral challenge of maybe lack of human capacity sometimes. So you have all these regulations that you need to fulfill. European Arctic, connected Arctic, connected Europe, like Norway, Iceland. What is Europeans' perspective on not becoming more flexible from this regulatory perspective here in the Arctic, but again, being a bit more faster, you know, when it comes to development opportunities and opening the market to northern companies?
Thank you. Well, I think I agree with both. Again, it's needed to have regulations, laws. You know, we all stick to international law, not only to rules. Rules meaning what I say is the rule. No, it's what we have all agreed to. That is the law. And this, any human society needs them. On the other hand, they should cover as many perspectives as possible. We want to protect environment. We want to facilitate the economy and investments. We want to protect people, to have social protection and rights for workers, for consumers. So it's multifaceted. I don't think it's right to say that we should simplify at all costs and everything. No. We are in a world that is getting more complicated, and we should live with the complexity. But we should reduce its weight and it should not impede human initiatives, innovation, and going fast when it's for the people's good. So it's a right balance to find. And we are, in fact, the institutions, the EU, the Commission proposes, and the states and the Parliament decide. So it's quite comprehensive. We try to reduce the weight of regulation, but sometimes we stick to it. There are, can I tell, in the world of digital, of protection of data, of human rights and human freedoms in our digital area, there are strong pressures on us to reduce and facilitating and letting the companies do. I sometimes use the example, to what do we need artificial intelligence and digitalization? Either to fully control the society? Not really. Or to give profits to a few companies? Not either. But to improve the life of citizens, companies, for progress. We always try and stick to human progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's so much to follow up, but I now want to bring in the two other panelists. Paul, we talked about the complexities of Arctic change. You know, we heard from Espen on how Finnmark has been becoming a center to some extent, and now it's back to becoming more of a frontier. From your perspective, from the Sami Council's perspective, like how have you seen and discussed the recent changes of the last year, 2 years, in a more from the geoeconomic, from the geopolitics, etc.
Yeah, thank you for this invitation to sit in this panel. I'm pretty fresh new politician in the Sami Parliament. I represent the Sami Parliament in Norway. We have also Sami people in Sweden, Finland, and also in Russia. And the big concern is that after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine in 2022, we lost our contact with the brothers and sisters in Russia. And we also had to take in consideration that we couldn't contact them because that might be a risk for them, a security risk, because unfortunately Putin has put a lot of indigenous peoples in the terror list, and this is a very big concern, representing the indigenous peoples. And before I say anything more, my English is a little bit rusty, so if I say something that is not clear, just rephrase it. But let me start with one big reminder, and that is that the indigenous peoples, the Sami peoples, they are living in the north, they are living in the Arctic. And it's important to us to understate that we see a lot of piece by piece. They are taking a land. I don't like to use the word land grabbing, but in some sentence that makes some meaning. And for that perspective, we need to talk about the governance, cooperation, and development in the High North. And the increased global attention toward the Arctic as well comes as a time in a growing geopolitical tension, as we have heard about already. And indigenous people has always been cross-border cooperation, and it must continue to do so. But as I said, we see the situation in Russia. It's difficult. We have the Arctic Council. We have the Barents cooperation. That is important. We have these days actually in the UN. We have the UN Permanent Forum for Indigenous Peoples who's gathered there. They're discussing the situation right now. We also have the EU, which is a regulator, which we think is very important to regulate the, if we say it in the three big states, Russia, US, and China. They are trying to divide the globe between themselves, just to put it in some easy perspective. So then EU is very important to come and do this regulation. And also, of course, the Canadian, we have had a good cooperation with the Canadian and the indigenous peoples there. And we face the same challenges, and that is the climate changes, which is very concerning, and especially, for example, the reindeer herders, which is outside every day. They are herding the reindeers. They see the climate changes is straight. They see it every day. The trees are growing higher in the mountains. The winter has been wetter, warmer, and we see the nature is shifting. Animals is walking other routes than they normally do, and so on. And of course, that is a big concern. And we also see the need for resources, and that happens in the Sami areas and the Sami land. The windmills and the wind farms, the extraction of, or the mining industry, and everything of that. And all these things, the climate changes, the land, and the need for resources, is in the Sami areas. And we also have this geopolitical situation. That means that there has been militarization and more need for exercises and so on, which happens also in the reindeer herding areas. And we also have the Sami people in Sweden and Finland. We try to cooperate with them better during this Sami Parliamentary Council, which is very important to us, and we try to also what's it called, to get the borders not that less complicated, to explain it in an easy way. So last, I will say that from the Sami and the indigenous perspective and the Sami Parliament, we mean that nothing to do, or I have to look at my...
Nothing about us.
Nothing about us without us. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Also follow up here, you mentioned that some of the people-to-people cooperation got lost with the full-scale invasion and whatever happened afterwards with your family on the Russian side of the border. But you also said there's an opportunity to do more with the Canadian side, for example. Could you elaborate a bit more on how that works on a day-to-day basis in your job within the Sami Parliament, and how can you actually do more cooperation with the Sami or the indigenous people on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean?
Yes, we have this the Sami Parliamentary Council, as I said, which we from Norway, Finland, and Sweden are together, and we saw this winter when the pressure on Kalalit Nunat was there. We had a common statement to support the Greenland. We told it to the previous foreign minister Motzfeldt. And that we did together also in cooperation with the Canadian. And we also met Her Excellency Governor Mary Simon, and of course the Inuit Minister Nathan Obed. And we share a lot of common, we have a lot of common challenges. And in Canada they have done a lot to how to explain it, make it easier for the indigenous peoples to have their rights and so on. And in the Sami perspective, and here we still lack a lot. For example, yesterday we had a meeting with the defense chief, Erik Kristoffer, and that was the first time he had been to the Sami Parliament. Really? And that is important. That is example of how we can cooperate with the other, and that was a historical happening.
Amy, you have a follow-up?
I just to build on that, I think that's a great intervention. The collaboration is really important. One very practical thing that we're able to do together I mean, I guess I'd preface it by saying we're two countries that are both on the path to reconciliation with our indigenous peoples, and we're both very humble about what we have to learn from that. One of the tools that we have in Canada is something called a Global Arctic Leadership Initiative, which allows us to fund representatives, Indigenous representatives from Canada to come to Norway and meet with the Sami to talk about what their experience has been and share that. And in the lead up to well, actually just following the release of the Truth and Reconciliation report here, I know we had some representatives come and have discussions about, well, what does that mean? What does the implementation of that mean? What are some of the questions we have? How can we move forward together? So that is another example of collaboration. And then also the Norwegian Parliament sent a committee to Canada to study how the government actually implemented their Truth and Reconciliation response. So on both sides, there's a lot of recognition of the potential to learn from each other in how we walk that path to reconciliation together. So it's a great area of collaboration and support where we still have a lot to learn, but we're working on it together.
Maybe one very quick follow-up question. I mean, we heard about the external pressure. Are you experiencing that in the Sami in the parliament, within your day-to-day work, that you have more and more interest from very far away into the Arctic for, I don't know, random emails you get or whatever? Is that something that is also affecting you?
Yeah, that I can confirm. We have a lot of invitations that we should go and participate in different things, and also that a lot of, for example, students, they want to come and visit the Sami parliament in Karasjok, and we have a lot of ambassadors, of course. We have a lot of tourists as well, and a lot of representatives from businesses and so on and so on. So we have and we are 5 politicians, the president, and we have 4 in the council. And we have and 3 political advisors. We are 9 persons in the Norwegian Sami parliament. And for example, when I started in October, the first council meeting we had during the 2 first weeks, 137 invitations on different topics and events and so on. So there's a big question.
I find it always striking when you talk to journalists from outside the Arctic and they talk about the resources in the Arctic, and then your response is, but you need people to develop or exploit resources, and we lack some people, on so many levels. And oh yeah, that's a good point, but it's obvious. Sophie, finally, we will not talk about the American elephant in the room, but you work in DC. You work for an institution, the German Marshall Fund, that is connected both in the United States and in Europe. How do you see the changes happening, affecting the northern parts of Europe from your perspective, from a Washington-based perspective, and how do you see the discussion going on in DC when it comes to Europe and the Arctic, and maybe also Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Andreas, and thanks so much for having me here. It's fantastic to be in Bodø. I work on Nordic and Arctic security, so I know how important this region is, and it's really, really great to be here in person, and of course with all these distinguished panelists and hearing all the great points that you made to open the discussion today. So maybe just a little bit more background on the German Marshall Fund to kind of explain a little bit more my vantage point and perspective. So as Andreas said, we're headquartered in DC. We have offices in Europe. We've been working on transatlantic relations since the 70s, so that's really our bread and butter. But I think in the current context, our leadership has been very focused in adapting to the global order shifts, essentially. And so what GMF leadership has been working on is thinking through the future of the transatlantic relationship, that shifting, that balance, getting that balance right, helping Europeans to do more and doing that in a way that benefits both sides. So exactly what the foreign minister emphasized, essentially, this dual track of doing more and ensuring that NATO remains strong, but also doing more with European allies and also, of course, with Canada. So that's something that we're very focused on at the German Marshall Fund, so it's great to be part of this discussion. As a think tank in DC, I think, just to explain a little bit, think tanks in DC are a little bit closer to the policy landscape than I think think tanks in Europe, which are a little bit more academic. But we're, of course, at that intersection, and we're getting a lot of insights into government perspectives, other policymaker perspectives, and also, I will also do a lot of work engaging with the military, so I get a lot of insights into perspectives from them. And so I just want to emphasize, obviously, Washington is not monolithic. There's a whole spectrum of opinions, so I can't fully represent all of that. But just to capture a little bit the debate that's going on, I, of course, want to start by acknowledging that some of the things that have come out of the White House and broader cabinet have been quite concerning, of course, to Europe and Canada, and I think also to all of us who care very deeply about the transatlantic relationship and who know how important allies are to the United States. But I think it's also important to emphasize that overall in DC, of course, again, can't capture everyone's opinion, but I think despite a lot of the political noise, overall, the US population remains very supportive of the transatlantic relationship, views NATO overall positively, and there's also incredible support from the part of Congress on a bipartisan basis, essentially, when it comes to the support of NATO. And so while this time feels disruptive, I think it's also important to take a step back and look kind of at some of the continuity, because a lot of the things that are happening today, they've been in the works for a long time, and they're just taking a little bit of a different shape now. So I think for the last 15 to 20 years, I think what we've really seen in U.S. strategy is a greater focus on global power shifts, and of course China's rise has been watched very closely in D.C. And more recently, of course, we've seen Russia come back into focus, and the threat that Russia poses both to its neighbors as well as to the broader transatlantic relationship. And I think in that context, what a lot of the debate in DC has been about is how DC can prioritize and kind of stretch its bandwidth and resources, and understanding that the US cannot do everything all at once, and needs to prioritize. And so I think for many years, we've seen more of a focus on asking allies to do more, and I think allies are doing more, and so that's the very positive story here as well. And I think we've really seen that take shape since 2014, of course, since Russia's invasion of Crimea, but it's really sped up more recently in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And so we've seen dramatic rises in European defense spending. And so what we're seeing in DC is the debate really shifting. I think we're no longer talking so much about whether Europe is spending, but whether that spending delivers real capabilities. And again, here, I think it's important to acknowledge that Russia's war against Ukraine is the key catalyst here, but of course the pressure from the US has also been evolving. So just wanted to kind of set the scene by saying there has been a lot of continuity, and that's not often acknowledged. But I think where the Trump administration differs is the tone towards allies and the method in many ways, which is more sharper, more transactional, more explicit, and at times less predictable. And I think that last part, the less predictable, is the part that's really the most complex to handle, because it really complicates long-term and also short-term planning for allies. And in the end, that makes it harder for allies to deliver in the areas that the US would like allies to focus on. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and I think it's something that many people in DC and in the US broadly are very focused on and are trying to raise awareness to. I think additionally, in terms of looking at the focus of the Trump administration, especially looking at some of the recent strategies that the administration has rolled out, we've seen an increased focus on industrial capacity, on supply chain security, and on delivering a real capability and involving the commercial sector in that as well. We've also seen, and this is reflected in some of the strategies as well, a clear prioritization of allies that are model allies, and that is a direct quote from the National Defense Strategy, highlighting allies that are capable, dependable, and really able to deliver. And I think Norway, of course, stands out here as one of such model allies, and generally the Nordics are very much punching above their weight. The other focus that we've been seeing, and we've already heard a little bit about that, is a growing focus on homeland defense in the US and the Western Hemisphere. And in that context, we've seen, of course, the US asking the Europeans to do more for the defense of Europe. I think it's important to highlight, and the foreign minister did that to an extent as well, that the homeland defense does not start and stop at the US border. And allies are incredibly important to homeland defense, to situational awareness, to see what's happening, as you emphasized, in the region, and to ensure that the US and the allies actually have the capacity to respond, because a lot of that response capability actually rests with allies. And also the industrial capability, we're seeing a lot of focus on defense industrial development, and allies are playing a key role in that. We're also seeing, of course, more of regionalization in the context of NATO, more of a focus on minilateral formats within the alliance, and I think that's important. It's giving the alliance more agility, but I think a lot of people are also focused on the fact that deterrence requires coherence and also transatlantic coherence. So deterrence, of course, rests on credibility, that includes political credibility, and military credibility. And so in turn, we need to facilitate that cohesion and ensure that there's interoperability and a clear communication of resolve. And I think, as I alluded to earlier, ensuring that we maintain that deterrence and capability to act and respond accordingly, we really need adequate planning horizons, especially on the European side and on the side of allies, if allies are being asked to do more, to ensure that they can actually fill the potential gaps that are being left if the US decides to prioritize other theaters. And so I just want to say that a lot of people in the US and also in Europe, of course, are focused on that and underscoring that. So maybe just as a big picture, from my perspective, I think that the transatlantic relation will persist. I think it's critically important. We're very interconnected. Europe is critically important to the United States from an economic perspective, same with Canada, and from a security perspective. So I think the transatlantic relationship is not going anywhere, but of course it's shifting. And it's taking on a little bit of a different shape. And I think one of the key underlying shifts is that we're thinking differently about dependence today. And I think that's a trend that we're seeing in all countries. Of course, we're seeing it in Europe and Canada when it comes to viewing the United States. But the United States also is very acutely aware of its dependencies. Many of those, of course, are focused on China and the critical mineral supply chain question. So I think what we're seeing everywhere is just a greater push towards sovereignty and sovereign capabilities and greater national resilience. And so I think in the short term, as we're seeing this relationship shift take place, there's a little bit more uncertainty right now, especially in areas where US commitments feel perhaps less clear-cut and a little bit more volatile. And again, this really complicates long-term and as well as short-term planning for allies. At the same time, I want to emphasize that, in my daily conversations, I hear from everyone from all sides that military-to-military cooperation remains very strong. And of course, there is high US public support for the transatlantic relationship. So I think in the long term, we'll see a transatlantic relationship that looks slightly different. We'll have Europe and Canada that invest more, and that will translate into the delivery of more real capabilities. And that will also mean that the relationship is more balanced, that there's less dependence on the United States, and that also means greater leverage for Europe and Canada in the relationship. So this is just to say that I think we're definitely in a disruptive period to a certain extent, where many assumptions are being questioned. But I think that can also be an opportunity, and everyone always speaks about, letting no crisis go to waste. But I really do think that this is a moment for imagination, and we're having here, all these policymakers, ambassadors are kind of at the front line of this disruptive period. But I think especially for us in the think tank world and students, all of those who have a little bit more time to think in the long term, I think it's a really important time to think about what you want the future of the transatlantic relationship to look like, and what you can do to contribute to that, to make that happen.
Thank you very much. Very strong words. Also, follow up here. The US is very much Arctic because of Alaska. Do you see in the DC world more Alaskan topics to be discussed as well because of Trump's interest on, in Greenland, on the Arctic overall, or is the Arctic always be that bigger picture that Espen draw, as well, or is it more of a regional topic, maybe Alaska being so far away from the sea? Has that changed a bit?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think overall there's absolutely more focus on the Arctic, where people, the normal population didn't think about the Arctic all the time. Those people that weren't living in the region. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect or dissonance between kind of the high-level public focus and what we're actually seeing that being translated to. I think the Alaska senators are very strong advocates of Alaska, and especially in the context of the whole debate around Greenland, have frequently emphasized that the US has its Arctic territory or its Arctic state already, and could do a lot to invest more in that Alaska presence. So we'll have to see how that takes shape. I think there's currently a lot of focus on the U.S. defense budget, and we'll have to see how that translates into actually capabilities. But I think there are certain policymakers and perspectives that are always emphasizing the importance of Alaska. But I think overall, the discussion is just a little bit broader.
Thank you. For the last 10, 11 minutes, I want to zoom out a bit and zoom in. What I've heard from all of you was international law, added values, or the common values we share, predictability, which is important to development. Amy, what you said, from 7 to 2 years. I mean, Espen, on your day-to-day work, international law is per se not under pressure, but we have seen with the Strait of Hormuz now that, free shipping can also be negotiated if two actors said, okay, you pay or you pay us, and then you can pass. Like, how do you strengthen international law in your day-to-day work with Canadians, with European partners, with indigenous partners? How is that, and what do you see as the big challenge in that regard?
Well, the latter part of your question is the easy one, because with the European Union and Canada, we don't have a problem on international law. Actually, we are co-defenders of international law, and I think that even in a world where some great powers are losing interest or actually violating international law, and there are many examples, Hormuz just one of them, the attack on Iran was a violation of international law. Obviously, Russia's attack on Ukraine was a violation of international law. Iran's closing is also a violation of international law. So there are many challenges there that we need to deal with. But most countries on the planet prefer to live in a world run by international law. So it's not a general unraveling. It's just sadly some of the big ones who are less engaged. But then, as exactly Prime Minister Carney said in Davos and elsewhere, then the middle powers, which I interpret broadly, middle and not middle, smaller countries, really need to reinforce our emphasis and our, not only in words but also in deeds in defense of international law, which is why throughout our Arctic work, including the security and defense part of it, is very much rooted in a very strong understanding of we're defending what is prescribed by international law, and we're inviting others to co-defend it with us. So it's I mean, that connection is very, very obvious, and it's not easy. It's getting harder, but then we just have to work harder to defend it.
Nicola, on the European perspective on international laws?
No surprise that I fully agree. For centuries, we've been trying to rule by sword and by war, and at some point we said enough. I mean, and we were wise enough to say enough, and so we developed. We picked the seeds of international law, of better organization of human societies, both inside and outside, between societies and states, and we stick to it because it works. It has worked, it works, and it will work in the future. I have no doubt that we will come back to it, because an international law-based international society is that what can bring peace, prosperity, and cooperation and solidarity, what we believe in. So yes, no doubt that it's absolutely key. On the other hand, states and entities like the European Union balance between your values and principles and your interests, because you have the reality of life, you have and that's why we cannot only abide by international law and so say we won't do anything that will not be in full conformity with international law. We have to adapt it. It's not compromising. It's simply finding solutions because we need them. You know, it was Kant who said, you are the philosopher, but you have no hands. So we need our hands to live, and this is being practical and being, trying to be efficient on a day-to-day basis.
Amy?
Maybe just, I also agree with everything. How boring to agree with everything. I'll just throw two additional things out there. One is we need to make sure that our democratic institutions stay strong. And campaigns of disinformation and misinformation are attacking those every day. And so it is all of our responsibility to call those out and try and counter those as much as we possibly can in order to ensure that that global rules-based order stays prioritized, because we need our populations to believe in that as well. And then the other thing I would add is making sure that our organizations, our international organizations, are fit for purpose. Something that I know Norway and Canada are working closely on is WTO reform. If those institutions are working well, if they're efficient and effective, as Nicolas says, then they will be strong advocates for us. So I think those are the two things that I would add to supporting the international rules-based order. Thanks.
Paul, from your perspective, I mean, we know that the importance for international cooperation, transporter cooperation, for indigenous and no borders actually has been the key message of all centuries ahead. But how to strengthen international law, the predictability from your perspective?
I think from the indigenous and Sami parliament's perspective, it's very important that we respect the international law. And we all remember, and we say it, and we remember ourselves about it all the time, and we have to speak about it in every corner where we meet other people from different kinds from different places of the world. I think I will end it with this: that the most sustainable Arctic is one where people can continue to live good lives on their own terms. That requires not only international cooperation, but also respect, trust, and are willing to share power. So security in the Arctic is also about cultural and social resilience. Thank you.
So I want to say, in continuation of what Paul Bendik says, I have interacted with the Sami Parliament and Council for many years in different roles, and in all of that interaction, the Sami administration and Sami politicians have always made reference to international law, correctly so, and Norwegian law on that affects indigenous land use is again developed in parallel to international law. So it directly connected. Same in Canada. And as you said, we were very bad at this, both of us, and now we're getting better, and we're still work in progress. So international law has been incredibly important for indigenous peoples, and it's actually quite well protected in international law. The problem is not international law; it's the respect for international law, and that is to be heightened. But it just it just shows the importance also on practical, for the individual reindeer herder has rights that are embedded on the global level, and he or she knows. This is something you're very aware of in the Sami community. And some other Norwegians think you are too aware of it because it of course, it conflicts with other area use interest, which is a real debate we have to take as adults and seriously. But the Arctic Council also, when it was set up in 96, it was a time where we domestically were developing our policies on this, so it has a strong emphasis on the indigenous populations. And it also has provided for new arenas for both, cross Sami context, but also cross Inuit context, which I saw very closely when I visited Iqaluit, which is the capital of Nunavut in North Canada, which is actually much south of here, but it looks like looks like Longyearbyen on a summer day.
Yeah, so much colder.
Because you don't have the Gulf Stream from the Mexican Gulf, which we call it, but again, I could see how close the Greenland Inuits and the Canadian Inuits were, communicating directly because they're actually neighbors up there, which the rest of us have forgotten, but now we are remembering.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, I have one comment to Foreign Minister Espen, and that is about consultation. Because the Sami people, reindeer herders especially, they experience too often that when decisions are made, they are called in the end. And we also have this with about the free, prior informed consent. And many think that is the so-called Sami veto, but it's not a veto. It's about a process to find good solution on difficult questions, and especially according to when industries want land. So I will hopefully I will think that that will be much more in also the processes in the future that we are using this consultation and the FPIC as it's shortened. Thank you.
I think that could be the topic for next year. The future of democracy in general under AI, the decision-making processes, consultation, etc. Thank you very much for that comment. We have 1 minute left. I want to put you on a spot like Andreas Östhagen did yesterday. We have a lot of young people here. What should they write their master thesis and PhDs on when it comes to the future of the Arctic? Nicola?
Oh my God. well, I think future of democracy, how to reinvent coexistence and the fact that you have the basic principles of democracy that are adapted to the new world and to the new world of information and quick information. Yeah.
Sophie?
Oh, goodness. I think I'm also going to say space, because I'm always looking to understand that more, and there's such a great intersection between the Arctic and space. So, yeah, I would look forward to reading that PhD thesis.
All right. Well,
industry's impact on indigenous land.
Thank you.
I would love to have more advice on conflicting uses of land, indigenous rights, energy transition, how we manage that as governance to respect all of those different rights and interests as we move forward. So if anyone's working on that, please share, because it's really, really important for us to learn more about that.
Finally, Espen.
So I'll stick with climate change mitigation and adaptation to climate change in Nordic environment, in North Nordic environment.
Thank you. Generally note, my supervisor told me don't write about the Arctic and the EU in the Arctic in 2011 when I started my PhD, and I did. And so stick with the interests and don't always listen to your supervisors. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us here and for kicking off the High North Dialogue 2026, sorry. Back in the future. We take not only a short break, but as I said, we go out to side events and then we come back to this room for more discussions. Again, thank you for all of you. Oh, I was told I have chocolate for all of you. Wow. Local chocolate,
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Altså, tusen takk.
On an equal footing. Thank you so
Excellent
much.
point.
Thank you very much.